Here on Sefer Melachim Alef and Megilat Root. So you'll have something for Shavuot already, something to think about to get us into the mood, if you will. What I want to show you is some of the overlap between the two Sfarim, believe it or not, and some themes that hopefully we can take with us. Can everybody hear me, by the way? There's a big echo in the room here. You good? Okay, we're the newly reconstructed social hall. Still under construction, apparently, in some way, but mostly we're here.
Can you just remind everybody to mute themselves if they're not?
Yeah, if you can mute yourself when you're not speaking, that would be so much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. And let me present a few minutes. And then, of course, I'm happy to take questions, comments. What we're up to in Sefer Melachim Alef is actually the transition between Shlomo HaMelech and his son Rechavam. We're going to take a break from chapter 11 that we're up to, where we're going to focus on Yeravam. We'll do that next week in depth. This morning, I want to focus specifically on the nexus between Sefer Melachim Alef and Megilat Root, and to show you some themes that hopefully will be resonant. If you look at the beginning of Sefer Melachim, there is already a reference to Bathsheba. We know at the very beginning of Sefer Melachim, coming into David, an ailing David HaMelech, and upbraiding him essentially for permitting, by no fault of his own, really, except passivity, I guess. Maybe that is what's at fault. Permitting Adoniyahu to take the throne. There's a whole story there about how David says no way. Of course, it's going to be Shlomo. That David HaMelech has some kind of a woman named Abishaga Shunamit who is with him, warming him. We talked about that extensively. When Shlomo has cemented his place on the throne, there's a little denouement to the story where Adoniyahu, the now recently deposed Adoniyahu, asks of Bathsheba that she should please make a small request on his behalf to the new king, to Shlomo HaMelech, and that is for Abishag Shunamit to come be married to him. Now, this was patently a ploy, which Shlomo sees right through. And it was patently, so obviously a ploy, because there's a halacha psuka that everybody knew that someone who was married to the king, or even some appurtenance of the king, human or physical in other ways, was not allowed to be repurposed for a commoner, unless you had a common claim to the throne, in which case it would be great for you to just say, hey, let me have access to Abishag Shunamit, and then I could turn around and say, I'm really the king. Look, I have one of the main trappings of kingship, of royalty. When you look at page 404 in the Koren Tanakh, that's this one over here, 404, the Koren Tanakh, the older edition of the Koren Tanakh, Hebrew English. You have another Tanakh there? No problem. So you're looking up Melachim Aleph, chapter 2, verse 11. And it describes a little paragraph that's sort of the transition, summarizing David HaMelech and then Shlomo HaMelech taking the throne. So verses 11 and 12. We learned this already, so I'm not spending too much time on it, but it just tells us, David al Yisrael, it's 40 years total for Shlomo HaMelech, for David HaMelech, ruling. So his kingdom is very set, established, and he sat on his father's throne. Now Adoniyahu ben Chagit comes to Bathsheba, the mother of Shlomo, verse 13. Vayavo Adoniyahu ben Chagit el Bathsheba im Shlomo v'tomer shalom bo'echa vayomer shalom, and he asks of her this small request. You can read the psukim for yourself, but when you get to pasuk Yotet, verse 19, we learn that Bathsheba came in to speak with Shlomo. ותבוא בת-שבע אל המלך שלמה, לדבר לו על אדוניהו, ויקום המלך לקראתה, וישתחוו לה, וישב על כיסאו. When Bathsheba comes in to King Shlomo, note Hamelech Shlomo, to speak to him about what Adoniyahu has requested. Vayakom Hamelech likrata, the king gets up in order to greet her, and Vayishtachu la, he bows to her. She's his mother, even though he's the king. She's still the mother of the king. He has to have respect for his mother, even though he's the king. Vayeshiv al kis'o, he sits upon his throne. Vayasem kisei le'im hamelach v'ateshiv limino, and he places a chair for the mother of the king, and she sits to his right. She asks him this question, which is, he knows, by the by, she knows, is also a ploy. She agrees to what Adoniyahu requests, she always has antipathy towards Adoniyahu. She was nobody's fool. Remember, she's taking all the initiative at the beginning of the book to ensure that Shlomo is not going to be sidelined. And if you read that parak, there also you see that she goes to Natan Navi and gets him involved. She's very, very wise. She's a wise woman. So she wasn't a patsy here. She said, to Adoniyahu, that's your request? You'd like to take something that belongs to the king? Sure, I'll be happy to present that for you. So that's what she does. It's a trap. So she asks it. It's mentioned, and of course the king says, "Well, why don't you just give him the kingship? He's my brother, but obviously he also wants to be the king. He's half brother." So if you look at verse 23, 24, it describes the oath that the king takes. I told him already he can't get in my way. He's doing it. He's trying to take over. He's making a move to take over. I told him, I warned him previously, finished. And he dispatches Benel ben Yoyada, and he kills him, and Adoniyahu, that's it. It's the end of Adoniyahu. But in this, there's a description of the mother of Shlomo coming in. That's Bathsheba. He bows to her, right? And he gives her a seat. That's the pshat, right? Gives her a seat next to him. But Chazal have another idea. They point out just on the level of pshat, there's something that doesn't add up. It refers to Bathsheba coming into the king. And then it refers to her as Aim Hamelach. You could answer it on the love shot and say she's his mother. She's the what is it? The king mother. So she gets a seat at the table, at the throne. He made her a specific seat. But Chazal saw something else here. Chazal saw that this seat was actually for someone else. If you look with me in the sheet, the Gemara Masechet Bava Batra tells us who this other person was. It's quoting. It's based on a pasuk from Sefer Divrei Hayamim, and this Sefer of Divrei Hayamim, as you know, is a chronicle. It's called in English Chronicles. It goes through from Adam Harishon through to the end of the first temple. A lot of it, not all, but a lot of it is just that, chronicles, a genealogy. It's like a massive family tree to authenticate Malchut Beit David. So it gets into the tribe of Yehuda, and therefore, in the description of all of the descendants of Yehuda, there's sometimes poetic language, which is prime real estate within the Tanakh to be mined for its midrashic significance. Okay, so there's a whole pasuk here. Hema hayotzrim v'yoshvei nitaim v'gidra im hamelach b'malachto yeshvu sham. Hema hayotzrim. Who's that? That's Yonatav ben Rechav. Shinatzu shvat avihem. We'll get to him another time. Yoshvei nitaim. The one who sits among the plantings is a Shlomo Shdomel L'Natia B'Malchuto. Shlomo is considered like a planting, like a sapling in his kingdom. The Gidra Zu Sanhedrin Segidra Pritztin Yisrael. On the face of it, this Gemara seems like they just picked stuff like a potpourri. Oh, this word reminds us of this, like a word association. I'm going to show you before the end of today, God willing. That is not, it's hardly a potpourri, but there is a certain inner logic here. But then mentions Imam Melech B'Malachto Yashvu Sham. So Im Hamelech B'Malachto Yashvu Sham. Im Hamelech could be read alliteratively. Im Hamelech Ayin Mem could also be Alef Mem. It's a stretch. It's not what the words say. It says Im Hamelech, but okay. So Zu Root Hamoaviyah Shirata Malchut Shlomo Ben Beno Shel Ben Bena. Right? Shneemar Vayasem Kisei Le'Aim Hamelech. He made a chair for the mother of royalty. Rebbe Lazar says, Ama Shel Malchut Davka. Ama Shel Malchut. Who is the mother of royalty? None other than the mother of all royalty for Jews, and that is the person we know as Ruth HaMoaviyah. And the Gemara here alleges, in fact, claims, it has a lot to go on, it's a traditional idea, that in point of fact, she was still alive. Now, she would have to be exceedingly old, right? Because remember, Ruth is going to marry Boaz, and they're going to have a son. Remember? Oved, and then comes Yishai, and then comes David, and then comes Shlomo. Nothing's impossible. We have a lot of history of people who are extremely old in Judaism who lived a very, very long life. it's possible that she lived that long. And that's actually what's being conveyed to us, is that she was extremely aged. And some continuity here between Shlomo HaMelech sitting on his throne and the need for there to be a chair for his elter Bubby, I guess, would be the expression, right? His great grandmother seated with him at the table. Right. Give me one more minute, Shelley, if that's okay. I want to see one more source to see what the Maharal does with this Gemara. The Maharal writes, "Le'ima shel malchut, de'ein lefarish le'em hamelach mamash." The Maharal of Prague says it's not appropriate to explain the words "em hamelach" as referring literally to Bathsheba. V'chiyesh la'asod kisei le'imo. Did he have to make a throne for his own mother? Remember, she came in to see him. That's when he figured out to make her a throne. Umayinyan ha'em lekan. What do you have to mention a mother altogether in this instance? Avarot Salomar le'ima shel malchut, the mother of royalty. Kime'acha shekol malchut yatsa mimena samla kisei. All of the royalty came from her. The Davidic line is because of her, and she was the one to authenticate the status of Shlomo as the chosen king, because she's the great grandmother of Shlomo HaMelech. Vakatuv balahodia ki malchut Shlomo haya bishleimut ki im kisei HaMelech haya kisei le'ima shel malchut ki ha'em hu ikar hamalchut b'malchut Beit David, because the mother is actually the mainstay of royalty, of rulership in the kingdom of the house of David. Right? Therefore, this shows the fullness of the claim of Shlomo HaMelech, as opposed to other pretenders to the throne outside of the house of David. She's sitting there. She's the Bubby. She's still alive. K'moshe Amar Gamkein Lifnei Zeh, as it says earlier, V'dvarim Atikim Ki Atik Yomin Amra Kikar Gazav Sidar Hashem Yitbarach Malchut David Sheyeh Yotze Al Yedei Nekevot Miuchadot K'moshe Hayu B'not Lot V'Ruta Moaviyah. I didn't give it to you. I probably should have. The Gemara Bava Batra has a section a little bit earlier where it quotes another cryptic pasuk from Divrei Hayamim, in which it also makes mention of this idea that the mother of royalty is in fact also a reference to the relationship back to these grand women, the Nekevot Miuchadot, who are the daughters of Lot, Ruta Movia in particular, Ukemoshe Mochiach Hakatuv She'amar Nimtzaot. There, the verse uses Hanimtzaot, Kemoshe Amar Kasher Adam Motzet Asher Hu Mavakesh. The scripture itself makes reference to the daughters who are found. The Banotu Nimtzaot. This is back in the Torah in Sefer Breshit, in the story of the daughters of Lot. So it says Nimtzaot, those who are found, like there's something special about them. What's special? There's a date with destiny that they have. The Benot Lot, particularly Moav, Ruta Moaviyah. Ulekach Sam Shlomo Kisei le'im hamelach ima shemalchut asher haita miyuchedet la. It was something that was designated and special for her. In other words, to show honor to her, even generations later. I don't know if they were reading Sefer route, the Megilat route, but she was sitting there every time you'd come in. Okay, and if she had a seat there, the idea here, of course, is that she is there when he is adjudicating cases. And later on, chapter 3 is going to be the case with the famous case with the two women with the baby, right? And who does it belong to, and who's the real mother? She was definitely the real mother. She's the counsel she's sitting next to him, right? Ulekach lo meita Ruth ad shirata Shlomo Yosheva kisei malchuto ki Shlomo haya malchut David b'shleimut ulekach nikra Shlomo. He was called Shlomo because he was the fullness, the wholeness of the completion, rather, of the rulership of David. V'lo meita Ruth shahaita siba l'malchut Beit David ad shahaita amalchut b'shleimut ulekach sam kisei le'im hamelach v'zeu shleimut amalchut shaya nikra b'shem Shlomo. Seems like a repetition of what he just maybe it's a scriptural error here in the Maharal. I don't know why I just said it again, but the point is Shlomo is the fulfillment of Malchut Beit David, and that's why they call him Shlomo, and therefore he's sitting there, she's next to him, to his right, I should say, to his right side, and that authenticates who he is. So in other words, and when Bathsheba comes in to speak with him, according to Chazal, the seat is not for her. The seat is for the elder Bubby who's sitting there, right? Who's watching this unfold. Now, why is that mentioned in a pasuk about Bathsheba coming in and laying claim to, right? Because it's about who's the king and who's not the king. Now, Adoniyahu, by the by, has the same claim because Adoniyahu is also a descendant of Ruta Moaviyah, right? But the idea here that she's in the room, she's in the palace, yeah. V'amar Rabbi Elazar, the Gemara Masechet Yevamot. The Gemara says, Amar Elazar, Mai dichtiv nivrechu b'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama, right? The bracha that's given to Avram Avinu. All the families will be blessed through you. The word levarech is to bless, but the word levarech, something that is also in the world of agriculture, is some element of grafting, of putting one thing with another. Is also the idea is related to the word bracha. It's a cognate of the word bracha. The Admor Hazakin of Chabad has a lot to say about this in his various writings and elsewhere in the world of Chassidut. That's what a bracha is. You're taking a shoot and you're grafting. You bring something from on high to down low. That's what a bracha is. You're making mention. The act you're going to do now is actually from on high and it's bringing it down, into this world. So havracha is the expression. Havracha is to graft. So the Gemara, one of the interpretations, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Lavram, shtei, not brachot, but brechot tovot yeshli lahavrich becha. I have two beautiful shoots that I want to graft within you. And who's that? Ruth HaMoaviyah, v'Naamah Ammonit, the two descendants of Benot Lot, right? A lot of parallels, obviously. We always talk about, there's a lot of shiurim that I've heard and learned over the years, and I think we've even learned together the connections of the Benot Lot and what that means, and Ruth, and she comes from that, and the Chesed, and right. There's a lot to say. We're not going down that road today, but just to say the idea that Avram Avinu is already being told that it's going to come through with Ruth HaMoaviyah, right? And note the language that's used here as the language of something that's being planted, something that's a shoot. So who is the ultimate planting who comes from that? The Maharsha says, that's what the Gemara told us back up here, Gemara Bava Batra. Hema yotzim v'yoshvei nita'im. So who's the yoshvei nita'im? Zeh Shlomo sh'domo tiyat b'malchuto. Shlomo is considered like a sapling in his rulership. Came from a graft, from another shoot, from Ruth to Moaviyah, grafted to get, right? V'amar yoshvei nita'im, says the Maharsha. I didn't forget about Yishalab. I got to finish this source because it's like, this is finishing the point. Zachar gam zeh al shezichta Ruth bezeh lamalchut Shlomo v'dimala lenatia al shem shenit mana Shlomo lemelech biyalduto. He was considered like a young sapling when he was put into the mix. Why? Right? There's a tradition that he was like 12 years old, so he's a young sapling. K'mosh katuv Shlomo b'ni nar v'rach shelo hayalo az rak yud bet shanim. Right, he was 12 years old, according to the Madrash, when he was born. At the bottom of page 1, right? Unatim kol makom nemar al ilan, right? Yalda kimo aser natiyot lebeit se'ah begimel ilanot ve'od. Next page. Al pimasha amru. Sorry. So stop there. Begimel ilanot. So there's a description of the natia means a young sapling. That's what a natia is, because it's recently planted. So Shlomo HaMelech is considered, go back to the Gemara on page 1, right? Who's the Yoshvei Natayim? That's Shlomo. And who's Im HaMelech Malchuta Yashvu Sham? Who is with the king when he ruled? They sat there with him. Ruth sat there with him. Again, I'm not 100% sure now in retrospect if I was correct that Im HaMelech was an alliteration to Aim HaMelech, Im and Aim. Maybe that's not what it means, but with the king in his work, they sat there. Who's the they? Ruth HaMoaviyah is sitting there with him. So maybe I was incorrect to put it on the words, but she's the Ima Shel Malchut. She has that status. So now, when we have this imagery that Ruth HaMoaviyah is like the shoot that's being grafted into the Jewish people, as a convert, she comes into the Jewish people, but from her stalk comes what? A sapling that is Shlomo HaMelech. Therefore, we understand that when he initially sits on the throne, he's a boy, teenager, and who sits next to him? His great-grandmother. Now, top of page 2, Ve'od, right? Al Pimash Amru Perek Bal Yavimtov and V'ruchu V'cha Kol Goyei. The Marsha quotes this Gemara that we just learned. Shnei brechot tovim yesh lehavrik b'cha zu tamov yavina ma'amonit. Shanatia chashuva mehabrechot elu hi malchut shlomo b'gadluto. The most important planting, the sapling that is most important that emerged from these shoots is the kingdom of Shlomo when he grew up. Ve'amar v'gidra lo zu Sanhedrin. Why? Once he built the Beit HaMikdash, the Lishkat HaGazit, the chamber of hewn stone was also built. That's when they built the Beit HaMikdash. So the Sanhedrin a place to be. And on account of that Sanhedrin Gadol, they fixed the breach to solidify and concretize what was already known previously when Ruth came into the fold, but they concretized it now as a convened Sanhedrin Gadol in the place of Yishkat HaGazit, right? They said she is permitted to be a Jew. There was a question about that? Well, clearly, because there was a Sefer written about her by Shmuel Hanavi who wanted to make sure that it would shore up that she is the real thing, right? She's really a Jew, because otherwise it's Ir on David HaMelech. Therefore, she had the merit to live a long life to see the honor of kingship in Shlomo, where there's no longer a claim against the Malchut Beit David. There will be a claim because, of course, there's going to be a breakaway, but at least it's not going to be a claim that Shlomo is actually the Davidic line and they're really Jews, etc. Right? When they're going to break off, spoiler alert, they're not going to break off because of religious or title issues. It's going to have much more to do with economic issues, taxation, right? So Nira Medichtiv Yashvu Lashon Rabim, the plural, right? So why is it in the plural? That Yeshvu, the Yeshvu, back in the Gemara before in Baba Batra, it said Yeshvu, they're going to sit with the king together. So Darash La, Arut, Batsheva. It's both of them. V'ach mefurish b'midrash Yalkut. It's what it says in Medrash Yalkut, the Yalkut Shimoni. Minayin ata omer shlometa Rut achirata Shlomo ben beno shel ben bena dan dinin shel zonot. How do you know that it was until Ruth she was still alive when he did that din? He made that happen between the two prostitutes. Shenemar im hamelach b'malachto yeshvu. In his work, they sat together with him during his work. V'amar vayasem kiso le'em hamelach v'teshiv liyamino vayasem kiso le'em hamelach zu batsheva. Right, the chair in this matter is really Batsheva. Bateshiv limino zurut. They're both here according to the Medrash Yalkut Shimon. Not the Gemara had the chair was only for Ruth. The Medrash has it's Batsheva and Ruth. The Hachi Mashmele Medrash. The Lokai Abatsheva Dichtiv Bahaukra. It's not referring. The Medrash is figuring it out because it mentioned Batsheva by name earlier. The Imkain Lo Havale Lememer Ela Vayasem La Kisei. He gave her a chair. She's already in the pasuk. He made for the mother a chair. She's mentioned, so he made for her a chair. Kimo vayishtachavu la, right? Vayishtachu la. Remember when she came in, he got up and he bowed to her. Dichtiv le'el. It says that minay. It says that before. Al kein darash le'eim hamelach lokai abatsheva ela Rut al Rut. Shehi aim hamalucha. Shehi bat melachim. Bat benoshel Eglon melech Moav. V'zacha bezeh kama shekatav v'yakom al kiso zacha bezeh shebat beno teshev bekisei hamlucha shel Yisrael. All right, there's a story about King Eglon Melech Moab about getting up in a moment of honor. So he had a zchut for that, right? That it would happen later on that his descendant would be a king in Israel. But what do you see from this whole section? You see very much a connection between the continuity of Shlomo is in harking back to Ruth Hamoaviyah and that she's still in the story. By the by, what's Shlomo's job in the story with the Zonot? He's figuring out status. Who's actually related to who? Who's actually descended of who? Another layer of the story. Yeah. Let me pause here because I know there's a lot of questions and comments. Shelly was first. I didn't get to read my chats yet. So why don't I take Shelly's question and then I'll read the chats after. Shelly, go ahead, please.
I'm going to make a comment that you wouldn't expect from me. And I would like to focus on the fact that this chair is to the right. The fact that— I
would not expect you to say that.
To the right, God's right hand, anything right is chesed. Chesed would definitely be Ruth because look at what she does.
Good, yeah. That's good.
Chesed is taxation. So obviously Shlomo and Rechavam, who are her descendants, not going to follow that. Now, also, in a funny sort of way, we went into how Lot is actually bizarro world of chesed. He's trying to follow Abraham, but he can't quite get it right.
He's the cracked mirror of chesed.
Yes, it would be the same thing with his daughters, and what they did was the line of Moab and Ammon. So they're trying to get it right, but it doesn't quite work. Ruth is a descendant that does finally get it right. And the whole thing with the king is that there should be chesed. Excellent. There is chesed, except the Shlomo really doesn't do it. And that's what causes the kingdom to be split apart.
Good. Excellent. Shkoch, thank you. Excellent. Appreciate it. Now, I'm just going to get to the chats over here. Nachman's not going to be in the story today. He certainly mentioned the Megilat Ruth because he's part of the lineage, right? He's part of the lineage of how we get to Boaz. Straight shot. And Larry, thanks for clarifying that. Right. It was the whole question was the Torah says, we've treated this in other years, so I sort of took it as a given. Maybe I assumed too much. I'm sorry. The Torah specifically prohibits a Moavi and an Ammoni, the male members of those nations, to enter into the Jewish nation. Now, in the Hebrew language, oftentimes, when you want to speak about men and women, it goes to the masculine. All right, that's just how it goes. Deberal b'nei Yisrael, v'yiso. B'nei Yisrael doesn't mean just the men should go and not the women. It means the whole Jewish people, but they're referred to as the children of Israel. But the word banim really means the son. B'nei b'chori Yisrael. There are myriad examples. I mean, it's just a conjugation in Hebrew. So that begs the question: when it says lo yavo Moavi v'amoni b'kal Hashem, does it mean anybody from the nation? That could have been an understanding, but we have in the Gemara in Yevamot on Ayin Vav, etc., all of the questions that were raised about this issue, and the whole concept there is a tradition that it has from the Beit Din of Shmuel Hanavi, Shmuel Haramati, that in fact it's Moavi and Ammoni who cannot convert, but the Moavit and the Ammonit can convert, and therefore root is acceptable. Now that's putting a lot of eggs in the basket of an oral tradition, of a Masorah. If you just took a very literalist reading of the Torah, absent any kind of authoritative, interpretive, sort of line, it would be very easy to just conclude, no, it means anybody from those nations. Ergo, Ruth could not have converted. Ergo, David is illegitimate. Ergo, he's not really the king. There's no Davidic line. You understand? So it's very important to solidify. That's the book of Ruth. That's the whole story. It's written up Piruch HaKodesh as part of the scripture. We read it every Shavuot because the whole notion of Malchut Beit David is bound up with this, right? Okay. Anyone else questions, comments before I move to the next phase over here? We're about to go another layer deeper over here. Okay. So that's sort of phase part one. Now part two. Part two is a little focus on Batsheva. And full disclosure, I got this Torah from, of course, none other than Rav Yaakov Meidan, Rosh Yeshivat Har Etzion, brilliant mind. I don't entirely like his conclusion. Maybe we'll get all the way to his conclusion today. I don't entirely like it. So I'm going to go in a bit of a different direction, but let's try to understand it a little bit. I gave you the psukim on the sheet, page 2, but the truth is you can just as easily look this up in Sefer Mishlei if you prefer. It's chapter 31 in the book of Mishlei. I like looking in books better than on sheets when I can. So chapter 31 of Mishlei, it's the last chapter, the book of Mishlei, written by, of course, Shlomo HaMelech, Kayadua, well known, yes, not a surprise. We find many different Kishmo Kenhu, proverbs of Shlomo HaMelech throughout the book. And we also find one portion toward the end of it in which there's a discussion between the king and his mother. Look on page 824 in the Koren Tanakh. If you want to find it very quickly. He's not mentioned overtly, but Chazal seem to understand that it is a reference, more of, I would say, almost a derisive reference to Shlomo himself. Remember that Shlomo calls himself different things at different places, right? You have Shir Shlomo, but then you have Divrei Kohelet ben David, the ecclesiast, it's him, Yeah. Mishlei does begin, the beginning of Mishlei, like the first pasuk tells us Mishlei Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael. But there was sort of, we've talked about it a few times, in some regard, I don't mean it clinically, but there were multiple personalities in Shlomo, if you will, right? We talked about a story about him as someone who suddenly runs off and does someone else sitting in his throne. It's not really him. It's like, what does that mean? That we had that whole discussion. Don't want to open that box up again. That's a Pandora's box, certainly. That whole story. Actually, there was a box in that story, if you remember, about opening a box and finding the Shamir. Okay, chapter 31. This is another reference, according to Chazal, to none other than Shlomo HaMelech. I'll show you the source in a minute, but just to get the psukim down pat. Divrei Lemuel Melech Masa Asher Yisratu Imo. Right? These are the words of the king. His name is Lemuel. So Ibn Ezra and others interpreted Lemuel as Lamo El. He is toward God. He is for God. More of a positive view. But words that were given to him by his mother as Musar. Yisratu means she gave it to him. His mother gave it to him. Ma bri umar bar bitni ume bar nidarai. Right? What is it with you, my son? What is it with you, the one who emerged from my womb, the one from my neder, my oath. Al titin lanashim chelecha udrachecha lamchot melachin. Be careful, right? Don't give away what you have to women. Don't give away what you have to women. What shouldn't you give away to women? Your chayil. What's chayil? Strength or wealth, something, right? And be careful that you're not going to do something, your pathways, lamchot melachin, those who will mechiyah, destruction, destroy or erase your kingship. Be careful. It is not for kings to drink wine. Don't drink wine. Don't get drunk. Don't do that. Don't be engaged in drinking ale, right? Those who get angered. Why? You'll make mistakes. You'll drink. You'll get drunk. You'll forget that you're the lawgiver. You're the one who's in charge. You'll end up averting your gaze from proper judgment. You will pervert justice. It won't be good. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's not good. The poor people will not emerge with the right judgment. Give the ale over to someone who feels lost. Give the wine over to someone who is aggrieved of their spirit. Let them drink. Let them forget what's wrong. Forget their cares. That's for them to do, right? And not think about all of their suffering or the struggle, the toil. Open your mouth to those who cannot speak, right? And bring judgment to those who are going to be replaced. B'nei chalof means that they're out of here, they're leaving. Open your mouth, speak words of justice, and give out the judgment to the poor and the destitute. Right? Then you turn the page in the Koran Tanakh, page 825, and we know the rest of the Sefer off by heart. If you're looking on the sheet, you know what the next pasuk and the next psukim are, and they go right down to the end of the Sefer. I'll come back to that Eshet Chayil in a few minutes, but first, let's look at the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin. I gave you the Hebrew, gave you the English right here in Sefer in Masechet Sanhedrin. So Divrei Lemuel Melech Masa Asher Yisratu Imo Am Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Melamed Shekfa'ato Imo Ha'amud. His mother tied him to a post. You tie someone to a post when you're going to lash them. She was giving him a musar. How old was he when this happened? Is he 12? Is he 5? Is he a grown man? We'll soon see. She said to him, Ma bri ma bar bitni and bar nidri. Ma bri. What is it with you, my son? Everybody knows that your father was very much feared God. Everybody knows that, right? Right? Shelly, you already put into the chat what I'm going to say in a few minutes. You're right on the point. I'm not going to give it away for those who are here in person. So, but there's a little more to it. It's not exactly what you're saying. It's on that road, right? Everyone knows that your father was a great Yirei Shemayim. How do they know that? Didn't he have a lot of mistakes? He did a lot of bad things. Not a lot, but he did some things that were wrong, that were sinful. Natan Navi said so. He suffered mightily in his life. He became the greatest Baal Tshuva of Klal Yisrael. He brought about a Sefer called Tehillim, right? Through him, through Ruach HaKodesh. But what did Bathsheba get? Achshav Yomer, now you know what they'll say? Imo Garmalo, his mother caused him to do it. What's it? What's the it? What did Shlomo HaMelech do that was not good, that was maybe along the lines of something that Bathsheba did? Let's keep going. Umar Bar Bitni. All the other wives who were in your father's group of wives, he had 18 wives, once they had the baby, that was it. He didn't have any care for them anymore. She had a relationship with him ongoing, right? But I pushed my way and I came in. Why? When? How? Beginning of Sefer Melachim. Do you remember? Do you remember she goes in to see the king? She goes in to see, now you can ask me a million times. Now, why wasn't she the one with the king? Why did he need Avishaka Shunamit? So we talked about that beginning of Sefer Melachim. The given in the problem is she wasn't in there, but she came in guns blazing. Why did she do that? Kadeshi Yeheli ben Mizuras Umaluban. I did it because I wanted to make sure I'll have a child who has alacrity and who is pure. I disagree with the characterization of Cincino here, but I give you the Cincino translation. It's open source and it's easy to give you, so you have the basic outlay. But Mezuzah and Maluban you have Zrizut, and Maluban means white, pure. She wanted to look a certain way. She wanted him to be a certain way. I did this for you, and I did this even though everybody knows that my name is on the line, says Bathsheba, because of what happened. Everybody knows I had to push my way back in. Everybody knows that you're my son. And therefore what happens with you and what you do is reflecting back on me, says Bathsheba. Uma bar nidri kol nashas beit avicha yinodrot yeli ben hagun lamalchut. All the women who were in your father's household, they all had their own oaths that they took. They all said to themselves, that's what I want. I want that it should be that there is a child that I will have who will be the king. I want to have a son who is Zariz, has alacrity, and who is filled with Torah v'hagim l'neviut, and who is appropriate to be a Navi. That's what I wanted. But my dear boy, you're OTD, off the derech. And she gave him musar. She told him, you're doing wrong. It's wrong what you're doing. Al Melachim Lemuel. Al Limalachim Shato Yain, Al Limalachim Amrolo. She said to him when she quoted that's the pasuk we read from Mishlei, right? Lemuel, for the kings it's not to be drinking wine. She said to him, Ma lecha eitz malachim shishotim yam mishtakim v'omrim lama lanu el. Are you kidding me? You're hanging out with the kings who drink a lot of wine, who get drunk, and they say, what do we need God for? Are you joking? That's what this is becoming. Ulu Rosnim Esheichar, Mishikol Raze Olim Glulim Milo, Yishta Yain Vishtaker. You who have all the wisdom in the world, you know all the secrets of the world, you're going to be involved in drinking wine? I mean, really? So Ika de Amre Mishikol Rosne Olim Mashkim Pitcho, Yishta Yain Vishtaker, right? All the people in the world who are not of high stock, right? They're coming to stand before you. You're gonna drink wine. You're gonna get drunk over this. Like, seriously, right? So something's wrong with your phone. Keep speaking. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said. Rabbi Yitzchak responded. Right? These Rose Neolim, they're making God angry. You want to be with them? Right? They're coming to your door. Amar Rav Yitzchak minayin shechazer shlom v'hodali imod dichtiv ki bar anochi meish lo v'lo binat adam li ki bar anochi meish minoach dichtiv vayachal noach ish adama ha'adama. It's really adama, I think, not ha'adama, but lo binat adam li ze adam harishon. He says, I've done wrong. I'm in a bad way. I confesses to his mother that she's right, says the Gemara. He recognized that what she was saying was true, and what he was doing was totally incorrect. So before you say anything else, by now you probably remember, if you've been learning this sugya for a while together with me, you know that there's a famous story involving Shlomo HaMelech and wine and drinking and a woman who should not have been his wife, or he thought should be his wife for a good reason, but it didn't end well. And that's the next page, right? Hadahu dichtiv, the Gemara, the Madrash Rabba ben Barabba, Mishlei Devri Lemuel Melech, Lamikra Shlomo Lemuel. Why was he called Lemuel? How come? Why was he being called that? Oh, I'm Rabbi Yishmael, but Oto Halayla, Sheishlim Shlomo Melech Beit HaMikdash, Nasa Bitya Bat Paro, Vayasham Tzahelet Simchat Beit HaMikdash, Vitzahalat Bat Paro. The same night that Shlomo finished building the Beit HaMikdash, he also got married to the daughter of Paro, right? Here, by the way, fascinating, she's called Bitya, same name as from Moshe Rabbeinu. There's a parallel. Bitya was his adoptive mother. She wasn't his wife, right? But here we put the name back in according to this medrash. But there was a great simcha on the Beit HaMikdash and a simcha about Bat Paro that he's getting married, that he got married to her. Somehow the joy, the celebration for getting married to the Bat Paro was, seriously, was getting higher than that of the Beit HaMikdash. His mother came to upbraid him. She told him, "What are you doing? What's going on?" Huda Amar matla kula machanafim lamalka. So that's what it says. Matla kula machanfim lamalka. Like all the mechanfim, those who are going to flatter the king, they're all showing up. L'kach nikra lamuel sheishlich ol malchut shamayim me'alai. Klomar lama loel. In the Gemara, the kings are sitting and drinking, and the drinking buddies say to each other, "What do we need God for?" Who said it? According to this medrash, Shlomo HaMelech himself said it on the night that he married Bat Paro. He was so happy now that he built the Beit HaMikdash. As it says, right? So his anger, etc. Right? It's quite something, right? So Rabbanan say she brought in 1,000 tunes, 1,000 instruments. She brought into the bedroom. She wanted there to be tunes, music, beautiful songs. She said to him, listen to all the different types of music. Nothing wrong with music, is there? Music is innocuous. Music soothes the savage beast. Music creates harmonies between people and bridges gaps and it's makarif people. So let me tell you, this is for this. It was the beginning of his education in foreign ways that ended up leading him down a primrose path. That by the time you get to chapter 11. Daika, chapter 11 of Sefer Melachim, what's going on? It's about a zara, right? So it started when, on the night of the greatest success, was the night of the beginning of the slide. Master Bat Paro, what did she do? Kimin peres shitchalo lemala mimed v'kavabo kol minei avanim tovot umargaliot shayu mavhikot ke'en kochavim mazalot. What did she do? She made him a canopied bed, and in the canopied bed, she decorated it with gems, so it looked exactly like stars. It looked like constellations, right? Every time he tried to get up, he was confused. Now, what are the kochavim mazalot? Not just so it looked like it was nighttime, but obviously, kochavim mazalot, of day kochavim mazalot. A lot, not all, but a lot of idolatry in antiquity was very much about constellations and the lines we draw between the dots in order to show pictures, etc. And here you'll find a parallel to something that when I give this same shiur on Shavuot, if you want to come, you can hear the same thing again. Just can't scream anything out to give it away, right? He slept in on the morning of the greatest day of Jewish history to that point. He didn't wake up in time. Sounds familiar? Amar Rabbi Levi, Oto Hayom Nitkarv Tamid Ba'arba Sha'ot Tasha'a Sheninu Masa. On that time, Sheninu Masa Haya. Okay, it's that's how it played out. Okay, so now v'hayu yisol atzavim shehayayom chanukat Beit HaMikdash v'yichon lasot mipnei sheyashen Shlomo v'hayu mityarim lakitzon pnei emer malchut. Right, according to one of the midrashim, the keys are under his pillow, but in this midrash it just says he was sleeping. They're not going to start the inauguration without him, right? Obvious. So what do? They went to Bathsheba and they said to her, "You have an ability. We remember to go into the king's bedroom and give him musar. We need you to do it again. And what happened before is happening now in another way, but we need you to go in there. And according to this medrash, it's very symmetrical, isn't it? Bathsheba, the mother of the king, gives musar to the king, her husband, and then she gives musar to the king, her son. And it's both times about some kind of great moment that is both a sin, yud, aleph, a climax, and it's a zenith of everything we hope for. King Shlomo, it's complete. It's completion of Malchut. And it's the moment of Binyan Ben Mikdash. And it's the day of the inauguration. Everything what we've waited for is all here. And then he's sleeping. And so she goes and she gives him musar. And when she tell him, stop drinking the wine of Bat Paro. She's no good for you. She is the antithesis of everything we're looking for. What you need, she says to him, is you need to think about who you want to be married to. And it dare not be Bat Paro. Bat Paro who's drawing you away from Hashem. Bat Paro who's giving you lots to drink and making you sleepy and giving you music and keeping you up all night. And what's going to happen? Rage and ruin. Not going to work. But what's the rest of that musar that Bathsheba, Aim Hamelech, gives to her beloved son? You need to reposition, recalibrate, and think more deeply about who is the ideal woman for you. And that's why the next pasuk is Eshet Chayil Miyimtzav Rachel Mipnei Michra. That's why it's a whole long description. And the description is of a woman who is both industrious, not sitting around doing nothing, but Paro, we're not sure what she does all day. She's industrious, she does things. And at the same time, she's supporting what her husband does. If you look in Mishlei, page 825, this is from Rav Meidan, he points out that in the Pasuk, Chav Gimel 23, Nodaba Sha'arim Bala B'Shifto B'Ziknei Aretz, her husband is known in the gates when he dwells or sits with the elders of the land. The gates of the town is where the shofet sits. The shofet is the judge. Shlomo HaMelech's main function is, aside from being the king, obviously, his main function is to lead the people, which includes adjudicating the stories, including what's going to happen with the two zonot in that story, right? But we talked about that. That wasn't a one-timer. I mean, it did happen one time, but it was the archetypal story. Do you want to know what our king is doing all day? Here's the story, basically, and just repeat it over and over again because it has different iterations, but the same story again and again. He's judging the people. He's figuring out the status of who is whose child and who goes with who, right? And what's true, even when the claims seem to be murky. It's he'll figure it out. She doesn't eat the bread of laziness. She's filled with chesed, right? Right? The whole idea here that in the end, in the gates of judgment, what will happen? Her own deeds will praise her in the gate, will be the source of praise in the gates. What is the gates? Again, it's the place of mishpat. Now, in case you're already thinking it, and you should be thinking it, you know already it doesn't exactly match up, because who is the Eshet Chayil? Well, there's only one other time in Tanakh, as Rav Meidan points out, that someone is called an Eshet Chayil. Only one other time, the whole Tanakh. And it was a book that was written much before. And that's in the third parak of Sefer Ruth. Va'ata biti al tir'i kol shotrmi eselach ki yodea kol sha'ar ami ki eshet chayil at. Who is Ruth, if not the great industrious woman? She's a great industrious woman who has to take on, Rav Meidan says, I do agree with this part. I'm not up to the part I don't agree with yet. Rav Meidan says, what does it mean that she's industrious? It means that, unfortunately, until Boaz comes in the picture, and he's only coming in the picture in chapter 3, the traditional family of antiquity, the husband is the hunter-gatherer, the wife is raising children, cooking the food, taking care of the clothing. But she's not out there, certainly not launching ships and buying fields. But what could Naomi and Ruth do? Naomi is, it seems, elderly. Certainly she acts elderly. She doesn't really leave the house. She calls herself very bitter. go, my child, go marry somebody else. I have no use for you anymore, and you have no use for me. And Ruth, the ultimate Balat Chesed, comes with her, takes care of her, and says Ramedan takes on all the trappings. When you're reading through these things, she's involved with the V'chagor Natmal Knani. A Knani is not a Canaanite. A Knani is a merchant. She's buying and selling. She's a businesswoman. Why is she a businesswoman? There's no Abba in the story. So she has to be all of that. She has to take on those roles in traditional society. It's certainly how it played out, right? So what is Bathsheba telling her son? This is the ultimate of what you're looking for. You want a woman who's going to be both of these things, who's both going to be the industrious woman and who's also going to be supportive of what you are doing. Now, of course, the Eshet Chayil in Eshet Chayil Miyimtza, it's very beautiful to say it's root completely, except as Ramedan points out, for the small problem that when Ruth's doing this, she didn't have a husband. When she's called the Eshet Chayil, she doesn't have a husband. She's, in fact, a widow. Remember? So we wouldn't know that Bashar Bala. It's Shemayim. Nah, there's no midrash or anything like that. That's way too far a stretch. No one claims that. So when you look through this section, though, you start to realize that what Bathsheba is presenting to her son is not the woman you have now who's making you drunk and taking you off your game. You need to realize that you need to find a wife who is going to be someone who is going to embody the characteristics of an Eshet Chayil, who is a model of an Eshet Chayil, right? She's sitting to your right. But you're going to need to find someone, obviously, where there's going to be back and forth. When you're the shofet, she's supportive. He's known in the court. She's known for her industriousness, as building something, right? And that's verse 29. Rabot banot asu chayil. Many women did a lot of things of wealth, etc. Ve'at alit al kulana. You're above them all, right? Now you're familiar. I'm familiar with the tradition, the Medrash Tanchuma. It's not the Pshat, but the Medrash Tanchuma, saying that this section is actually what Avram Avinu speaks about Sarah Imenu. And that later on, it's inscribed in Sefer Mishlei. I have no qualms with that Medrash, and I don't think it's contradictory here either. Bathsheba says to her son, we have a Masorah, Eshet Chayil, Miyim Tzavarach, Michra, Batach Bah, Lev Ba'ala, B'Shalalo, Yachsar, right? And that's what you should be looking for, not what you're doing now. And that's why you have to read Eshet Chayil, where it's printed. Why is it printed here? Why did we wait until here? Because it's the most beautiful application, I would say, incorporating that Medrash and Medrash Tanchuma, of the hesped Avram Avinu gave for Sarah Imenu, comes into the Torah B'chtav. Where? In Sefer Mishlei. Why? Because a mother said to her son, this is the wife you're looking for. These are the characteristics you want. And who's sitting to your right? The only other person who's actually called an Eshet Chayil directly in the Torah. Yeah? Okay. And as Shelley pointed out, Shlomo doesn't seem to take her musar and change. And that's a sad reality. Sad reality. What Rav Meidan goes on to say, just so you know, I'll tell you, and I'm conflicted about it. I think he says, you know who the Eshet Chayil that Shlomo chose? And again, and it referenced what Shelley just wrote in the chat, which is Shlomo doesn't take her musar. He marries the other shoot that came from Lot. He marries Naamah Ammonit, and their child continues the Davidic line. Who else, who possibly has that? Maybe I like it a little better than when I originally read it. Who else has the characteristics of Chesed, dating back to the story with Lot, right? That there's something there that from that conflagration, literal and moral conflagration, will emerge something great. So there's something there about also Naamah Ammonit, also someone who converted to Judaism, a Gior at Tzedek. So Rechavam, etc. Yeah. But the reason I'm conflicted about it is because when I look in the Midrashim, in the end of the life of Rechavam, it mentions his mother is Naamah twice, that she's Naamah Ammonit. And the Chachamim the Mefarshim seem to take a rather low view of that. They say that actually there was backsliding there, but that she contributed to Rechavam doing the wrong thing and to the culture of idolatry. So you could say it's the flower that did not bloom, but at least that was the intention here, which leaves us with the question of, so what happens to this typology of, the Eshet Chayil, etc. 10 more minutes, and I want to show you the next layer down of this off of the world of Pshat, but I think a deep message for us that also resonates for Shavuot. By the by, I didn't put in these sources, but in the Shavuot edition, you can bet it's going to be in there. The Medrash describing that Hashem sends Moshe Rabbeinu to wake up the Jewish people on the morning of Matan Torah. I could be sleeping in now. Isn't everything we did for this? I slept in the night of. Wasn't perfect. There were problems. There were issues. What's the Tikkun Leil Shavuot? Let's try to fix it. We'll do another time. We'll stay up. Yeah. Not everybody did this, but it's not a halacha. It's not even not something that if you have any qualms, don't do it. But Tikkun Leil Shavuot related to this idea that the Jewish people slept in. So we'll fix the Magen Avram says that they were Hasidim who used to stay. Hasidim, not Hasidim, but pious people. Of yesteryear, this was what they did, based on the Zohar Kadosh, about this whole idea that the Jewish people slept in, this midrashic tradition. But let's go a little bit deeper. I just want to draw together a few of these themes. We have here Ruth and Bathsheba, and I mentioned Naamah. There's something else here, and that is the idea that when Ruth goes in for that meeting with Boaz, a very strange meeting in the Goren and the threshing floor in the middle of the night, her mother-in-law, Naomi, tells her to change her clothing. Verachatzt vasacht vasamt simlotaich alaich v'yaradet hagoren al tivad'i laish ad kalato lechov lishtot. Go down, change your, place your garment upon you. The Yerushalmi, quoted by the Torah Tamima, Yerushalmi in Peah says, v'chi arumahaita, what she was naked, that her mother told her put on clothing. What does that mean, put on clothing? Ella elu bigdei Shabbat. She told her, put on your clothing for Shabbat. Mikana, Rabbi Chanina, tzarich adam sheyu lo shnei atafim, echad lechol ve'echad l'Shabbat. A person has to have two sets of clothing, says Rabbi Chanina, and in antiquity that was a big deal. One for weekdays and one for Shabbat. We learn it from Ruth. Ruth put on her Shabbat clothes to go meet Boaz in the middle of the night. Why was the nicest clothes she owned? She got the Shabbos clothes. Says the Kohen from Lublin. This is part of the essay, many chapters, of 7-8 chapters long, called Kedushat Shabbat, where the Pri Tzaddik, the Kohen from Lublin, wants to unpack themes in the holiday of Shabbat, day of Shabbat, and to explain it to us on a deeper level. So listen to what he says. Va'al kain, otam begadim nikraim simlotayich. These clothes that you wear on Shabbat are called simlotayich, your clothes, unique to you. Shemiyuchadim lo, they're unique, designated for you. Uviyichud, ne'emar zeh befeirush bakatuv gabe Ruth, shnikra ima shel malchut. Specifically with regard to Ruth, who is called the mother of kingship, right? As we saw, K'moshe Amru Chazal, right? Where in the Gemara Baba Batra, al pasuk, Eim Hamelach. We saw this, gabe Shlomo Hamelach, alav hashalom, right? Okay, now, Kihi Haita Hashorish Lemidat Malchut. She was the root, the source of all of the attribute of kingdom, physically speaking, because from her came, right? David. Right? David, who emerges out of the admixture of good and evil in Sdom, the daughter of Lot. What happens there? The elder daughter. Umimena, from her, the daughter of Lot, from whom the son Moab is born, Me'av, right? Umimena nitgalgel ad Ruth. It went all the way till Ruth. And what did Ruth do? That which was an admixture of good and evil, you could say was winnowed to be only good. The wheat was separated from the chaff. The tov was refined and found its expression in Ruth. V'zachta, she had the merit, v'zachta l'kedushat Shabbat malchita liot ima shel malchut. I probably should have given you one other source, which I did not give you, which is that it's not just in Lecha Dodi that refer to Shabbat as a queen. Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz in Tzfat in the 16th century writes Lecha Dodi based on the idea, principally, likrat kala, the idea and that we find in the Gemara that various chachamim would get ready for Shabbat by going out into the field. That's the origins of Kabbalat Shabbat. Went to the field and they say, we're going to greet Shabbat Malchita. We're going to greet the Shabbat Queen. Boi nitze likrat kala, Shabbat Malchita. So Shabbat, representationally, is the Shabbat Queen. You know already, you've been through this many times. We've talked about it many times. It's a bit Hasidic. So those of us who like Hasidus are going to be much happier. Those who don't are going to be scratching our heads. But we read it every day in the davening. We talk about David HaMelech unpacks 7 attributes with which God runs the world, 7 characteristics, right? And if you're learning Sfirat HaOmer now, you're saying Sfirat HaOmer, you know that if you don't say it, at least you see on the side, it's giving you the Sfirot, the 7 attributes for 7 weeks, right? And every week is divided to the parts. Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. What's number 7? Malchut. What's the 7th day of the week? The day of Malchut, the day of God as the king and Shabbat as the queen, right? And the Jewish people have a zivug with Shabbat, etc. Ruth HaMo'aviyah puts on her Shabbat clothing. She's representational of the midah, the attribute of kingship. Within her will be the emanation of the kingship of Malchut Beit David. She puts on her royal raiments, if you will, her Shabbat clothing. She had the kedusha of Shabbat Malchata to be the mother of kingdom, of royalty. Ve'al kain, and therefore, ba etzla hitgalut hazeh shel chiluf begadim b'Shabbat. Therefore, she is the one where we have the first reference to someone who puts on special clothing, which Chazal want us to know is not just everyday clothing, it's the special clothing of Shabbat. And therefore, it's called her clothing. It's designated for her. Root represents Malchut. Root represents that attribute of kingdom in the world. She therefore puts on the raiments of Shabbat because she herself is in a certain way a personification of Shabbat, which is in time what is expressed in persona through the kings, through David HaMelech and the Malchut, etc. Right? But in time it's Shabbat, and in people it's the Davidic line. Live shatam sheba'ata kishebaata. Sorry, vilav shetam. She wore those clothes. Sheba'ata leboaz livnot yano shalshel zu shal Melachim. Laharot lo davar zeh sheba yesh shorish davar zeh. She came in her Shabbat clothes to signal to him. I don't know if the Kohen from Lublin thinks that really, actually, he saw Shabbos clothes and said, "Oh, this is a queen coming." I don't know that happened literally, but on some spiritual level, that's what's going on. Min hastam, he also knows how to smell the smell of the clothing to know when it's big day Shabbat. Shehem me'ein big day Adam Harishon kinizkar le'el. I didn't give you that part, but that the clothing of Shabbat, like the clothing of Adam Harishon that smelled like Shabbat from the Reach of Gan Eden, those are the clothes, yes, that who is putting on to go in to see his father. Yeah, you're going to see right here, right? That's what Yaakov puts on for his fight. It has the aroma of the clothing for those who know how to smell that aroma. And to know what the root of the light of that, the one who is wearing them, has within him. Shibaguf hu or. V'ganuz v'ne'elam ba'olam hazeh u'mitzad halavush hamastir etzem ha'or v'niglebo rak hareach efshar lahargish gam ba'olam hazeh mi shezoch lirat Hashem sheyesh lo chush hareach beruchniut, with the body which represents the light that is hidden, that is not seen in this world. It is covered by the raiments of that which is seen outside, the malbush that we see outside, which it covers the etzem of the or. That is which means what emanates still? Only the aroma, the reach, not literally an aroma, but the reach of ruchniut. Who knows that? Someone who understands these things, like a Boaz who meets with a Ruda Moavia, the Alkain, Nemar, Ze, the Reach, Bigadav, Yitzchak, Shar Gashat Harech, Humishor, Darga, the Yira. I won't tell you what that is. That's another thing, back to something else that he wrote. But if you understood everything that I said, or even if you didn't understand everything that I said, at least you can now understand a little bit better what is the tradition of Klal Yisrael every single Friday night at the Shabbat table before we make Kiddush. We ask each other at the table, Eshet Chayil Miyimtza. and Eshet Chayil, who is the first Eshet Chayil mentioned in the Pshat in Sefer Ruth. And what does it mean that it emanates? So it's the theme of Sarah Imenu. Clear, barur. The Ner Daluk, the Bracha al Alechem, the Anan Kashur al Ohel, all those elements are right there. But the Eshet Chayil is also reference to the ideal typology of this woman. And on the day when we're ushering in Malchut, we don't say the name of Ruth, Hamoaviyah, as mentioned, but we're talking about Malchut and the proclamation that Hashem is the king of the world, Baruch Atah Hashem Melech Ha'olam, right? And that's the whole idea of Shabbat Malchata. And that's the big day Shabbat that a person needs to wear on Shabbat. Like she was the first one that it mentions in the Pshat, put on clothing that according to Rabbi Chanina, halachically, Rabbi Chanina Paskins, based on this drasha, you have to have two sets of clothing. Learn the halacha of Shabbos clothing from Ruth. What's Shabbos clothing? The clothing of royalty, the clothing that represents the royal raiments. If you heard all of this, hopefully you took something from it. And then we'll close with this pasuk, right? The pasuk and the Gemara that goes with it, full disclosure. Sena or ena b'not Zion b'melech Shlomo ba'atar she'itru lo imo b'yom chatunato v'yom simchat libo. Come out and see the daughters of Zion, daughters of Zion, the king Shlomo, and the crown that his mother made him on the day of his wedding and the day of his joy. And of course, the Mishnah in Masechet Tani, the next page 26b. What does it tell us? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, what are the happiest days of Jewish people? The 15th of Av and Yom Kippurim. Why? Because the daughters of Yerushalayim would go out to find their mate. And when they go out to find their mate, they don clothing that's not really their clothing, it's someone else's, so they don't embarrass somebody else. They're wearing the white garments of purity that belong to somebody else, and they're trying to find a mate, a husband, an appropriate husband, and they're going through all the gradations. But what do we have, right? Either beauty, right? If not the beauty, so you know what you should look to? Look to family. You know what the source is for that? Sheker hachein v'hevel hayofi, Ishayirat Hashem hiti talal. Davka, from what Batsheva tells Shlomo, that she thinks that this is what needs to be. Here's the text you need. Here's the tefillah you need. Maybe it was according to that matters, the hesped of Asari Menu, but maybe not. Maybe that's the first place it appears. Oh, yeah. Again, a madrash doesn't mean it's Lach Moshe Misina. It's not the same thing. But what does she tell him? Sheker Achain. Then she says, and by the way, Ve'omer Tunu Lami Priya Davi Bishar Maaseh. It's quoted right here in the madrash. Then what does the madrash say? Sen or Anabotze quotes this pasuk from Shir HaShirim, the crown that his mother made for him. Mazel Tov, the crown his mother made for him. So the crown his mother made for him is not just literally she made him a nice crown, but the crown she gave him by giving him a charge. The crown she gave him by being the one to barge in and tell him you're going wrong. By the crown she gave him, the crown that came from Ruth, that was going down the pike. Now look at the last line here of this Mishnah. The day of his wedding, Zeh Matan Torah. Uv'yom simchat libo, Zeh binyan Beit HaMikdash. Sheyibana b'mher b'meinu. The two great days that were the zenith, the end point. That's what we came for. That's the whole point. Neither of which was ultimately the end point, right? Matan Torah won't be long. There's going to be something that's going to happen, right? A few weeks later. Yom simchat libo, binyan Beit HaMikdash. We're done. Jewish history is over. He's Mashiach. Shlomo's Mashiach. It's over. Finished. No. Now Chazal were writing this after the Churban. Yeah. The whole concept here, the whole idea that the Eshet Chayil is transposed, if you will, throughout Jewish history, becomes part of our liturgy on Friday nights, which is a rather old minhag. Shalom Aleichem is much newer, by the way. Eshet Chayil, older. And of course, Chazal understand what's Eshet Chayil. Eshet Chayil is, it's not literally looking for a husband-wife situation. It's referencing the Eshet Chayil, according to some Midrashim, is the Torah itself. And the Torah itself is the partner of the Jewish people. The idea of the connections, right? I'll leave you already the Netziv. We don't have time for it. It's like another piece, but I'm way over time. I'll leave that for Shavuot. We come back. That's the end for this year on Shavuot. And of course, nobody knows how I'll fit it into the allotted time there, but that's on me. So I'll figure that out. Anyway, Shelley, you still have a comment or question? I see your hand is up. So take that. And hopefully it's not going to set us into like another 10 minutes. Shelley?
Okay, well, it just dawned on me when you were talking about these admixtures. I always couldn't figure out why God wanted Shlomo, who's a product of Batsheva, and this unthinkable sin that David did, why you'd want that. But then you also have the Moab, which is Lot and his daughters. So maybe God is trying to tell us that
I lost you there. Were you going to say something or you paused? Shelley, maybe God is trying to tell us. No, we can't hear you now. Come in, Shelley. Hello? I think computer froze.
yeah, my computer
Oh,
froze.
try one more time quickly because I don't want it to freeze again.
Oh, you didn't hear any of it?
No, maybe God is trying to tell us that we're waiting.
Okay,
with
God
bated
is
breath.
trying to, God is a wonderful, forgiving God, you know, and he's trying to say that if you think you've had an admixture, a horrible.
Yeah. Oh, we lost you again. I think you were trying to say that there's still other chances, second chances. If you do tshuva, the second chances. If you do tshuva, you do the second chances. If you fix it, and you can fix it, it's possible to fix. Anyway, I want to let everybody go, Shelley. I'm sorry it didn't work out with the end of what he wanted to say, but I think that's where you were going with it. I wish everyone a wonderful Shabbat and Shavuot. Everyone's welcome to join us. This year it's going to be on Shavuot at some point because I got a double dip at some point, but it'll be at a time that I don't think most of the people here would be able to come anyway. So I wish you all the best. Next week, Thursday, we will have a shiur, and it'll be right back to regular scheduled programming to chapter 11, the end of it, with the story there.